'Tis the season of stories, and the stories I wish to share with you or revisit are stories that I've heard and spoke of myself for years. So they may be new to you, and to maybe some of you, they're not. In Matthew, in the book of the Bible, it mentions the wise men, and they were bearing gifts. And they mention 3 gifts, don't they? Gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These wise men were following a star. Question for you. What happens when you're following a star and it leads you to a stable? How is your conduct affected by the outcome of your expectations? You have these expectations. Can you imagine the disappointment that the Magi, these wise men, must have felt when they were following that star? They even went to King Herod himself and inquired there. And they end up in the little town of Bethlehem, house of bread, in a stable. You know, every one of us have had times in our life when we have followed a star. You know, everything looked like it was just right in place, just the way it should be. Everything was promising. And then at the end, we ended up in the stable. The beautiful part of the Christmas story of the wise men is what they do when they come to the stable. Number one, they look for the good. They look for the good. And in doing so, they find God. They don't panic about the problem. They look at the problem as opportunity, and they hold steady. They kind of ask themselves, in this situation, where in the stable of life is God? Number one. Number two, when the wise men find a stable, they offer their very best. You know, they get up in the morning, a wise person does, they look in that mirror and they say, I am going to be giving my very best in the situation that I'm in. In the situation that I am in today, I'm going to give my very best. And they give their very best, and you know what? Then some more. Then some more after that. Number 3, when the wise men find a stable, they're open to and they change their direction if necessary. You know, the wise men found at the stable the baby, the Christ child, and they changed their direction with love and adoration for that Christ child. Not to protect themselves, but to protect that Holy Family. So when we come to the stables of life, let us be wise and remember to look for the good, to bring your very best, and then some. Then some. And allow Him to change the direction of our lives. Now, my last story here, folks, is one that I first heard on the radio in the car in 1965. In my little black Mustang, I heard this story. And this speaker would come on every day around the same time. But he would make a point to share this story around this time of the year. It's kind of a modern parable, if you will, on the Christmas story. And it's entitled, The Man and the Birds. I'm going to share the story with you the way I have done recently when I'm in the station of being a Gideon. Some of you know that I'm a Gideon. This man, this gentleman I'm going to tell you about, now he wasn't a Scrooge, a very decent man. He loved his family, took care of his family, and with his business handlings, he did the proper thing at the proper time, all the time. So he was a very, very decent man. However, he didn't believe in that incarnation thing about Jesus. He just didn't. And around this time every Christmas, he kind of got uneasy. Because you see, the family would go to the Christmas Eve service. And he told his wife, he said, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to go to church at Christmas Eve service with you tonight. He says, I would feel like a hypocrite. I don't believe in that Jesus thing. I don't believe that God became a man and came down to earth. And again, I would think I'd just be a hypocrite. And so I'm not going to go. But I'm going to stay up. When you get back from the Christmas Eve service, I will be here. They said, well, we'll say a prayer for you. Now, shortly after the family goes down the driveway from the farm, it starts to snow, Midwestern snow. So it started getting a little heavier, and then the wind started to blow. And then the snow, instead of coming vertically, it was going horizontally. So he saw this, and he thought, well, they took the pickup, and so they'll be okay. So he settles into his nice chair next to the fireplace. And pretty soon, he's sitting there, and he hears, and pretty soon, he hears some more. He thinks, what the heck is that against the house? So he sticks his head out the door, and he looks out. And to his amazement, he sees a whole flock of birds. You see, folks, these birds were flying into the picture window. The light from where he was by the fireplace and the light in the house was drawing the birds in their confusion in the blizzard right against the picture window. And so those little birds were right there, kind of confused, right there. And he goes to try to shoo them, and they just stay right there. He thinks, well, I need to do something. So he goes back in the house. He thinks right away. He says, we've got the barn. I will open up the barn. So he puts on his hat. He gets his coat on, gets his boots going, goes on out, goes through the snow, and the snow is getting deeper and deeper. Opens up the barn door, turns on the light, stands back and says, okay, now they'll go to this light. To his amazement, nothing happens. These little birds, they just stayed right on the snow, almost like they were froze there. So he gets thinking, well, maybe if I get behind them and shoo them, they will then go towards the light. So he gets behind the birds. He starts to shoo them. They start flying. They start running, but they don't go towards the barn. They go everywhere but the barn. So he gets rethinking, what can I do to save these little birds? So he goes into the house and he gets some breadcrumbs. And when he gets the breadcrumbs, he comes out and he starts to make a trail, right from where kind of the most of them are, all the way to the barn. That's gotta work. Folks, they just look at that. They don't even eat it. They're shivering. They have no intention of eating any of those frozen breadcrumbs. He doesn't know what he's going to do of these poor little weak birds. How could he help them? And then all of a sudden, in his analytical mind, it hit him. You know, if I became a bird, then they wouldn't be afraid of me. They would understand me. You see, when he was trying to move them and even give them help, it was like he was a monster to them. They were fearful of him. They didn't understand what he was trying to do for them. And again, his thought was, you know, if I became one of them, if I became a small bird, I could speak to them. Then they would see and they would come to understand that there is safety and I can take them to safety. About that time, at the church service where the family was at, they were lighting the candles as they were holding them, and they were singing the last hymn, that being Silent Night. And then they rang the church bells. And even though the church was away in that strong winter wind, he could hear the church bells. And folks, when he heard those church bells ringing, then all of a sudden he realized the true Christmas story and why Jesus needed to be Emmanuel, God with us, in order to lead us to safety. And at that point, the man got on his knees. Folks, I hope you enjoyed that modern parable of the Christmas story. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to me that I was able to share that with you today. You know, we here at Financial Markets, we wish to wish you a very Merry Christmas, a joyful Merry Christmas with your family, whether they be with you or they not be with you. And may the peace of God, that peace that passes all human understanding, that indeed that be with you and your family. And again, from us, Merry Christmas.